Welcome to Lunch with Tech Leaders, where we have engaging conversations about software development and cloud engineering with industry leaders and subject matter experts. These episodes are created by the Great Lakes Tech Leaders, an online community of technology practitioners. Please come join the conversation by visiting gltl.rbn.ai. Again, that's gltl.rbn.ai. Now strap in, because we're deploying to production in 3, 2, 1.
So, hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Great Lakes Tech Leadership Discussion. For this week, looks like the topic is security suites, which is a huge topic in and of itself. We'll just kind of skip through introductions because I think all of us have been on previous discussions before. Because we don't have a whole lot of time to talk about such a massive topic. So I think it was requested by Kyle. So I wasn't sure if you wanted to go through security related options in AWS or other cloud platforms, or talk about things from a more general perspective. I'll kick things over to you to kick things off.
Yeah, thank you. I thought it was a fairly broad topic that I'm hoping we don't have any issue filling 30 minutes with. Whether it's outside of AWS in terms of third-party offerings, or just within AWS. I was looking today, and just with the security, identity, and compliance services, they have 28 of them. So quite a large number there, and I think really just trying to gauge people's input on, are there certain ones they feel are core that are always used, or some, kind of ad hoc, or, where do we see people using things, namely in the platform or outside in some sort of like a seam, and just kind of, take it from there.
Yeah, excellent. Definitely a great choice there. And I can definitely speak to things more on the AWS side. Because just like you said, I mean, there are a ton of options, security related options. I mean, so much so that it is very overwhelming. The way that I like to think of it to help it make sense for me is I kind of sort things into categories or tiers. So at the first level, there are things that are more foundational, fundamental, things that are like resources that are building blocks to be able to bake in good security into the infrastructure that you're building. So things like IAM roles, security groups, NACLs, things of that nature. And then at the next tier would be AWS services that are that provide options for enhancing security along different lines. Things like KMS and ACM for certificates and encryption, two-system encryption, organizations and SSO to aid in multi-account governance, things of that nature. And then at the top level tier would be those services that kind of stitch together the other services from the previous level, things like Security Hub, which will kind of bring together services like guard duty and inspector and config, and can give you like a one or a single panel or a single pane of glass view into what's going on in your environment from a security perspective. And then also like Trusted Advisor, so which gives best practice recommendations and can help you detect any gaps. Like those three categories are the ones that it helps for me to kind of sort them like that. I don't know if that also resonates with you guys, but I find that there's a lot that's more situational, but definitely the foundational building blocks like security groups and IAM roles are ubiquitous. Like we use them day in and day out.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of kind of breaking them down. I think you do need your core components first, and understanding those before you can really get leverage the other tools. If you're just a start using guard duty first, you're going to get a ton of different messages saying, you got security groups open to the world, or, misconfigured IAM roles.
Right. Yeah. That's you turning those on first, like you said, would just give you an onslaught of messages. But yeah, some of the ones that I found the most useful, like I was saying before, those foundational ones. But once you get to a point where you have your environment set, at least the core components, having Trusted Advisor, I found actually has been quite useful in detecting any gaps. So, and Trusted Advisor you can use along multiple lines than just security. I mean, you can also look at things from a cost optimization perspective or from a performance perspective. But I really like that with Trusted Advisor, you can it'll scan through your whole environment, and if you have hundreds of security groups, and you just have, there's that one that's hiding in there that's got everything open to the entire world, it'll flag that and say, hey, did you mean to do this? Like, is this is something that's probably not a good idea for the most part. But yeah, like what types of services have you found, Kyle, that you tend to use more often, that are that you find the most useful?
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, some of them are just, by default. Outside of those, I think there's some interesting ones when you get into like control tower organizations, what you can do there on, multiple, different OUs or types of accounts is very powerful. Using config to have guardrails in place, centralizing, the security feedback through Security Hub is also very useful. I think CloudTrail is also one that is maybe often overlooked, but maybe the most important when you do need it. And then again, trying to centralize these and have them be in a place that that you do get that single pane of glass, so you're not hopping around per account trying to correlate results in different areas. I think those are some of the ones that I've used the most. I think more recently, AMS, even Cloud HSM to some degree, are services that we've been leveraging more and more of.
Yeah, I wholeheartely agree. And you bring up a good point with control tower and organizations too, because what we're seeing more and more is that there are a lot of the organizations we're working with and helping to build infrastructure with are going more into the multi-account strategy, even for things just as simple as separating environments. So like having your pre-prod and prod separated from your dev and test environments. So having that level of centralized control and that extra safety for ensuring that those environments are separated, and that only like setting who can control or who can manage what resources and what account is pretty important. And yeah, definitely big fan of organizations and control tower for allowing the ease of use and really setting that up from the get-go, because it can take a lot of work just spinning up all that and getting it in a place that follows best practices without something like control tower, which just helps you get off the ground a lot quicker. So yeah, just wanted to throw in my praise for that one.
So I guess a question I have, with so many different services out there for different, sometimes niche use cases, outside of maybe taking a course on something like the AWS security specialty certification, how do you find best like ways to get hands-on with something like maybe like IoT device defender, or Macy with large amounts of data in S3, to try to like showcase the way that it does work, what they can do. If you put PII somewhere in S3, how can you leverage Macy to show that it's identifying it correctly? I think this is something I'm hoping it's not just I struggle with, is with so many different things out there that cover such a broad, variety of use cases. How can you get hands-on and understand when to use them and how they're best used?
That's a great question. I know that the resources that I've relied on in the past was mostly the AWS training. Like there's a wealth of information there, and not just like online courses, but also just a central hub for documentation and blogs to help you get spun up, and actually workshops to get hands-on with a lot of this stuff. So I would definitely encourage you and anybody else uh, to look at the AWS Training Hub. Uh, there's a lot of stuff on there, but you can easily filter to um, the the domains, like the types of topics that you want to learn about, and also like filtering across different services. It may take a little bit of digging because it's not immediately obvious for a lot of those special cases, but there's definitely quite a lot of stuff on there. Um, but yeah, I'm not sure. Outside of that, I haven't really ventured a whole lot outside of those kind of resources. But um, yeah, I don't know if anybody else had any input for where to find more information about that kind of stuff. Oh, it sounds
Yeah,
like not, but
yeah, I was gonna say, one of the challenges I think that I've run into in the past has just been, with those specific use cases, I like to take the mentality that, security is everyone's job. You don't just, throw everything off to the cybersecurity team, expect them to know, cloud to, device to coding, different languages, frameworks. You really want to build that mentality that everyone's involved. But for, an edge case that you may have a device that is on AWS IoT and you want to use IoT Defender, um, what's best to have a real world use case that someone can get hands on to see, is this something that we should be leveraging or not? I think with some of the broader services, it's fairly straightforward. So something like WAF, like yes, and it's fairly easy to get a POC set up to showcase how it would work. Some of the other ones are a bit more difficult than that. Even with something like Macy, if you have petabytes in S3, maybe it's cost prohibitive to use. So just I guess assessing the different services out there and finding means to approach ones that maybe aren't as common.
right, yeah, that's a good point. Because yeah, I mean, and just trying to like not even just from a cost prohibitive perspective, but trying to test out a Macy with just a wealth of test data, like generating that test data or filling those buckets could be from a like extremely time intensive as well, right? If you're filling up that amount of data in your buckets. So yeah, that's a good question, and that's something that I'd have to dig a little bit to really look into for some of those the more niche ones like Macy and IoT Defender, like you said. Like my gut instinct would go to like pour over AWS documentation and some of the training materials that they provide. But yeah, I'm sure that there are some workshops out there that would allow you some hands-on stuff too.
And then I guess, another question I have is just around, the adoption of, something like we use Secrets Manager as an example, where, AWS has a service. There are also other cloud providers that have services, or something like HashiCorp Vault that will do something similar as well. Do you find majority of the time that just using the native AWS offerings is the way to go, or are the clients you're working with using other solutions and integrating them? Is there a preference?
Yeah, so it's kind of a mix of both, actually. So a lot of times when you use a lot of native offerings, you have that the built-in uh, like you don't have to worry about integration as much because everything understands how to communicate to each other. Like if you're using Secrets Manager, like you said, I mean, you can easily retrieve um, secrets manager secrets using something like Bodo, or just configuring other resources to be able to pull from that really, really easily. Um, there are cases though where we work with clients that prefer to use some third-party solutions as well, and sometimes even there are restrictions too. Like for one of the clients that I'm working with currently, they have a very hard restriction on using uh, two different vendors um, for network security. So they're using AWS for quite a lot, but they're also using um, Palo Alto, for example, to help to manage some of their other like networking needs. So you have kind of like a mix of both. And I will say that like using a mix of both like that, you do run into some issues like going against the grain in some cases, but there are some solutions that work really beautifully with it. I think one of the previous topics that we've talked about before at length was logging and monitoring, which goes hand in hand with security, and having solutions that provide like that centralized management for and log collection and aggregation. And some of those you can integrate really well if you don't, even if you don't have that within like native to AWS. Like Splunk is an industry standard that a lot of people love to use, which yeah, we've had a lot of previous discussions about that, and the OpenSearch, Elk Stack, that type of thing. But yeah, definitely, I'd say like if there's no strong preference from the client, my like the first recommendation for me would be just go with what AWS provides, because they do offer so much that um, there's not really a like any gaps that you need to worry about in the general case. But if the clients have like very strict requirements for using other vendors, or if they just prefer, yeah, there are a lot of solutions out there too that you can weave together to help enhance security overall, I would say.
I appreciate that. I think that makes sense. Um, but- One of the things you said earlier got me thinking, again, I think, yeah, Trusted Advisor is a phenomenal tool. And I was just looking into it, and it got me thinking around one, I don't know if you can call it a service, but wasn't listed on AWS's security things, but the well-architected review, and how there's a whole pillar within that for security. Is that something, have you run through those before? Do you find that it ties in evenly with some of the services they have at play?
Yes, absolutely. So, like you were saying, the well-architected framework, you can use that as just guidelines for building building a strong infrastructure architecture. And one of the pillars, like you're saying, security is a very like major component for just to have good architecture. And they they definitely try to make it easy to follow the well architected guidelines. So we've worked with clients before as well on just going through, because I think, and originally it was even just like a list, like a questionnaire that you could run through with the clients as like an AWS partner, and say like, okay, well, what are the types of things that, like, what does your architecture look like today? um, and just kind of get the ball rolling to discuss like, well, okay, are we following best practices? Are there any gaps that maybe you haven't thought about? um, and really get the client thinking, you know, just having that that security mindset from the get-go, like you're saying, that you said before. Like everybody needs to have that security mindset, like building it from the ground up rather than just offloading it to a separate team. Um, that was one of the main goals originally of the well-architected framework, program. And yeah, I think that a lot of the services um, help to, um, I guess enforce is not the right word, but just to guide people in that direction, like, um, to give you an example, right? You could have an RDS instance, plop it into a public AZ, uh, leave it open to the world, right, and put sensitive data in there. um, it's kind of it was kind of makes it hard for you to do that. It doesn't make it easy, but you could if you really wanted to. Um, but there are other things too that people don't necessarily think about that can kind of uh, they can get tripped up on. Like you could, one of the things I've seen before is somebody just creating an S3 bucket um, and just leaving it public and putting sensitive data in there without thinking, without actually tailoring the bucket policy to their needs. So yeah, like there's a lot of things that I think the well-architected framework following that is like um, a general guideline is really, really good, good practice. And the various services help you to achieve that, I would say, in the general sense.
And I guess maybe one last question from my side. When working with clients, do you tend, I mean, some of my experience in the past has been that maybe more traditional cybersecurity engineers, are not as up to speed with cloud offerings or even just how workloads run there. It's very much almost like an IS standpoint. And so when looking and working with cybersecurity teams to protect things that may be, more SaaS, PaaS, or serverless, do you find that to be challenging, or are there any barriers there, or is that hopefully getting better?
Well, I mean, I would hope so. Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, it's definitely getting better. I mean, it's a lot of times people will get tripped up on the terminology. Like there are some equivalents, I would say, between like some of the classic traditional, what you would call as like traditional security elements um, that are provided in AWS just under a different name or with slightly different functionality. And so once you get people up to speed, that it just gets faster and faster for them to be able to learn and to excel within the AWS cloud platform. Um, I would think I might be putting a couple of the others on the spot here, but I know Phil and Will have joined us. I know you guys have a background sort of like on the sysops networking side, like jumping into AWS as opposed to like having the traditional like non-cloud platform experience. Like, did you know, were there some pitfalls, places that you got tripped up when learning about AWS networking and security, like at that level?
I would say for me, definitely there were several areas. Um, so used to, I guess, in a way, like having firewall. Rarely ever are there rules made at the routers other than specific niches here, or more all-encompassing niches here and there, but rarely ever do we make anything there. So kind of like we did the rules at the firewall, the front end. We did the maybe rules on the server end. So having the in between um, with like security groups, that was kind of a newer concept. Like it all aligned once it all sunk in, but at the same time, like different terminologies, like you said, um, trying to match up those terminologies with what I've worked with previously, um, especially in the Cisco world and whatnot, was it took me a little while, I'll put it that way, before the light bulb finally came on.
Right. So like something like knackles, like the subnet controls for filtering traffic in and out would seem very similar to what you'd done before. But then, when you have security groups as more of like the resource to resource protection for traffic is, yeah, definitely I could see how that could trip you up initially. But yeah, I mean, in general, like you're saying, what I'm seeing is, yeah, once people get through and understand like the differences in those concepts, like they get rolling a lot faster. So yeah, cool. Well, I think we are coming up on time. Did anybody have any like closing comments or last questions or thoughts before we wrap up for today?
Nothing from my end. Really appreciate the discussion.
Yeah, and myself as well. Yeah, thank you all for joining, and yeah, thank you for the engaging discussion. And yeah, have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.